So this morning I've got a really nice message from Our Lady about loving the LGBT community as Catholics. My children, as apostles of love, I call you to loving those whom you may not ordinarily love. As Jesus stated so clearly in the Bible, how easy it is to love those that are like you, for even the pagans do that, but to love your enemies. My children, to so very many of you, you see and view LGBT people as your enemies. Instead of seeing souls who are loved infinitely by Jesus, you see enemies of the Church and of Jesus. My children, every single soul is precious to Jesus, and even the worst of sinners may convert and become the greatest of saints. Many people in the LGBT community have been extremely wounded by the Catholic Church through their Catholic parents and Catholic priests and Catholic communities. As they grew up, they were so often bullied and misunderstood, while led to believe that God did not love them or have a plan for them. Many fled their homes and found some sort of refuge among the LGBT community, but sadly, that often came with much use of drugs, sex, and other problems. Meanwhile, the Church provided little to no alternative, as many of these souls suffered unbearable isolation and rejection. Is it any surprise, my children, that these souls are angry and very angry? How will they ever come to know Jesus if you can't learn to love them and recognize where the Church has been at fault and wounded them? Loving the Church does not mean defending the unholy behaviour of the Church, no more than loving your father or mother who at times behaves badly. My children, you must open your hearts and learn to love these people, for they are also your brothers and sisters, and are called to holiness and to service in the Catholic Church just like you. Remember that where sin abounds, grace surabounds, and that none of you have reached perfect holiness yet despite many years of prayer. Open your hearts then, and offer the same love and mercy and patience to these LGBT souls as God has offered to you. Well, very profound, beautiful message, quite long as well, and yet very, very clear. And I suppose the message in summary really could be divided into three parts. The first part is basically just when Our Lady is saying, like Jesus says in the Bible, love your enemies. In other words, love those people who you find hard to love. And Our Lady starts off by saying that to many people, especially to many Catholic people out there, maybe even to many Catholic priests and even Catholic bishops, LGBT people have been sort of considered like enemies. And of course they're not, but sometimes people view them like this. And so Our Lady is saying, these people that you view as your enemies, instead of seeing them as your enemies, they are souls that are infinitely loved by Jesus. Every single soul is precious to Jesus, and even the worst of sinners may convert and become the greatest of saints. So the first part is basically Our Lady reaching out to every person and saying, love who you consider to be your enemies, because every soul is a child of God. The second part, in the middle part of the message, is Our Lady trying to explain, and not trying to explain, but explaining to people why LGBT people behave the way they behave. The end of it, she says, is it any surprise, my children, that these souls are angry and very angry? So, for example, I would meet a lot of Catholic people. They would see the LGBT community and they have nothing good to say about them. They're saying they're all sex maniacs, they're all this, they're all that, they're all the other, and unless they convert, they're going to rot in hell. So basically, they're just seeing the activities or seeing the sins or perceived sins that they get up to. But what they don't perhaps see is the background. Each adult that you see maybe in the middle of the Soho, in the middle of a gay pride parade that are 40, 50 years old or whatever, once upon a time they were 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old too. And Our Lady is explaining that many people in the LGBT community were extremely wounded by the Catholic Church. Now, not just by the Catholic Church, but because this ministry is a Catholic ministry and is linked to Medjugorje, I'm speaking, and Our Lady is speaking just specifically right now about the Catholic Church. And so many people, children, when they told their parents that they were gay or had gay tendencies, instead of being loved, helped, pastored, cared for, respected, even loved even more because life was going to be challenging. Instead of that, often they were judged, often that they were rejected. I know stories, for example, in France, where even from the youngest of age, the father would have said to the children, I hope you're not going to be a little faggot and stuff like that. Imagine saying that to a 5-year-old, to a 6-year-old, to a 7-year-old. And then it also happened in Catholic schools, the terrible bullying. Seamus, my friend, who you all know, he got terrible bullying when he was a child, and it was in a Catholic school. And he used to often say how the teachers did precious little to stop it, and it was like by their not intervening, it was like they were agreeing with it. Catholic priests, the same thing. Sometimes we can hear sermons from Catholic priests about gay people, and they're merciless, they're compassionless, they're judgmental, they're horrendous. If you were a gay person listening to them, you could feel like committing suicide afterwards. Also, then you could go along to youth groups and prayer groups, and there'll be talks for people and very good priests giving talks, but then they'll mention often nothing about LGBT, nothing if you're a gay person, nothing if you're struggling with gender dysphoria as a trans person. And so all this lack of talking about it. And then, for example, there can be terrible bullying, and priests and people don't say anything, don't speak out in the defense of people. So all this inflicts terrible, terrible wounds onto people. Same thing with Catholic communities. You can go in, and even to this day, I'm running this ministry in a church for Catholic LGBT people, and the amount of times of abuse and stuff and gossip and all sorts of stuff that can go around from other Catholic people, it is horrendous. And so these things Our Lady is saying didn't help LGBT people, and often for these reasons LGBT people had to flee the home. They were afraid to go into the Catholic Church. They were afraid even to go to a priest, to talk to a priest. And the only place they found some sort of solace or some sort of refuge was in the LGBT community. However, she's saying the LGBT community, while there is a sense of community and friendship and fellowship, the LGBT community isn't really known for its sense of prayer. And as a result, it is known for things like drugs, promiscuous sex, and all these type of things. But yet there are many people that went into the LGBT community because it was a better alternative to suicide. And Our Lady is saying that so many people in these places, they suffered unbearable isolation and rejection. Christmas came, Easter came, all these periods came. They felt they had no perhaps family to go home to. There was no ministry really in the church then. Our Lady is saying that the church then didn't provide alternatives. And as a result then, where are these souls going to go? So all that then Our Lady is saying that then it's up to us. How will these souls, and this is the third part, how will these souls ever come to know Jesus if we who are in the church already can't learn to love them and recognize where the church has been at fault and wounded them? In other words, our job, me as a Catholic, for example, isn't to defend absolutely everything that the Catholic Church has done. Me as a Catholic isn't to defend absolutely everything that my parish priest does. No more than me as a Catholic isn't to defend absolutely everything my mother or my father does. We all know that people and institutions have their limits. And so Our Lady is saying that loving the Catholic Church does not mean defending the unholy behaviour of the Church. In other words, the lack of love, the lack of support, the lack of pastoral care, the lack of intervening, the lack of justice, the lack of care for LGBT people, the lack of clear theology, the lack of clear pastoral theology. It's been a disaster. And so as Catholics, with humility, we can say to LGBT people that we are sorry. We are sorry that the Church hasn't provided more care for them. We are sorry for the wounds that have been inflicted. We are sorry for all these things. And we are willing to learn to love. So she's saying you must open your hearts and learn to love these people, for they are also your brothers and sisters, and they're called to service in the Catholic Church just like you. Now it's interesting how she says learn to love, because it is a process. It's like, how do you love these people? How do you love people who have a lifestyle that you disagree with? How do you love people that have a lifestyle that's so far away even from the teachings of the Church? Well, it's a process, isn't it? But you learn to love people through the eyes of mercy. You learn to love people by getting to know them, getting to understand where they are, and also then realizing, as she goes on to say, that where sin abounds, grace surrounds, and that none of us, or none of you, or me included, have reached perfect holiness yet, despite our many years of prayer. So in other words, realizing that Jesus loves people and picks up people where they're at, and Jesus does not expect an LGBT person, or anyone for that matter, to become holy within 2 days or a week or 1 month. that it's a long process. And Our Lady is saying, even look at our life, my life and your life, and look at all the years that me and you have been following Jesus, and yet look at the mistakes we make and the mercy and compassion and patience that Jesus has had with us. And so she finishes on that note. Open your hearts then and offer the same love, mercy and patience to these LGBT souls as God has offered to you. And so Our Lady is basically pleading with us to get rid of this them and us attitude and to just see it as us, to listen, to pray, to support, to help, to get to know, and afterwards to seek out people in this area who are more experienced and pray. Pray especially for our Catholic Church, pray for our priests, pray for our bishops, because this is a new area. And of course there are going to be disagreements, of course there are going to be mistakes, of course Jesus doesn't come down and give us a user manual as how to do it all. And so that's where we need to have patience, we need also to have humility, and we need to pray for people, even if we disagree with them or think they're wrong, or even if they are wrong, we still need to pray for them and not to judge them, because this is such a tricky and delicate area. So anyway, on that note, we thank Our Lady for this beautiful message, and we hope that it will touch hearts and that we will all grow. We'll grow to love, and we'll grow to be a church of love, of unity, and that this LGBT issue will no longer be an issue in the Catholic Church, but that it will become a place of love, of acceptance, of healing, and that we need no longer hide the wounds or even hide the bad things the church has done as well. The church has done many, many good things too, and regardless of any of the bad things, Jesus still has a solution. The solution is always there of Jesus' love, Jesus' mercy, and Jesus has got infinite love, infinite mercy, and can solve any problem and can heal over time any of the scandals, any of the abuses. But we need to open our hearts and open our hearts wide in honesty and humility to Him, and have pure and open hearts, willing to follow Jesus and willing to bring change and love into our Catholic Church for the good of everybody. So from London, from me, have a great day and thank you for watching.